The day began delightfully, or happily, of course. Every day began delightfully on Mount Olympus, for it was the home of the gods. Because these gods called Mount Olympus their home, they were called the Olympian gods. Sometimes they enjoyed roaming on earth, which is where the gods could be found at this moment, all except Hermes and Apollo. Hermes, messenger of the gods and son of Zeus, appeared in an instant at the side of his brother Apollo. A messenger is someone who carries messages and does errands. Hermes was wearing his famous winged sandals and winged helmet, and he carried a small wooden stick or baton with wings on either side. All of these extra wings gave Hermes even greater speed than he already possessed. Because he was constantly flitting here and there or moving lightly and quickly, carrying news among the gods and leading lost travelers back in the right direction, Hermes needed all the speed he could get. When he was moving his fastest, it always seemed as if, whoosh, he just appeared out of nowhere. Apollo, the god of music and poetry, was startled when Hermes suddenly appeared, even though he should have been used to it by now. "Do you have to pop up like that?" he protested, or said with disapproval. "I was just composing the most wonderful song on my harp, and you've made me forget where I was in the melody." "So sorry," Hermes exclaimed, although he was secretly pleased, for he was a bit of a trickster. Hermes went on, "But soon you will have more of an audience, for our father, Zeus, has summoned us all here to the great hall at once." Glancing around nervously, he added quietly, "And you know how he can be when he is kept waiting." Hermes looked at the harp he had given to Apollo long ago, made from the shell of a large tortoise with strings stretched across it. "Still, I can stay for a moment if you would be kind enough to play whatever you were working on." He sat down on a thick cushion on the floor. Apollo smiled, and because he was also the god of light, his smile could truly light up a room. "I would be delighted," he said, and his fingers ran so swiftly or quickly across the harp strings that they seemed almost liquid. As always, the song was so beautiful that anyone listening would think it must be the best song that could ever be played. That is, until Apollo played the next one. Hermes actually sat unmoving, which was quite rare for him, and at the end of the song he sighed. Then he was gone, his parting thank you hanging in the air. Apollo thought, "That boy must learn to slow down." Hermes had already left behind the high, cloud-covered mountain, and he was settling down into a lush, or thick and healthy, green forest below. Here Hermes was especially alert, for he was searching for the greatest of hunters, or rather huntresses, his sister, the goddess Artemis. If anything could travel as quickly as Hermes, it would be one of Artemis's arrows, for she was the goddess of hunting, wilderness, and animals. Hermes could hear the crashing and cracking of branches as something large broke through the trees nearby. Suddenly, a great antlered stag, or male deer, burst from the bushes not 5 feet from Hermes, panic in its eyes as it saw him. Turning, the stag disappeared from the little clearing as gracefully as it had appeared. Hermes had only enough time to think how graceful when 2 huge hounds leaped from the bushes, ready to follow the stag. Hermes simply held up his wooden baton, and the 2 dogs stopped at once, lying down before him and panting. A moment later, their mistress, Artemis, appeared. Disappointment showed on the goddess's face at losing the deer she had been hunting. At such moments, Artemis could be cruel, but when she saw Hermes, she smiled, for she was very fond of him. "I wondered why the hounds had stopped," she said. "I'm afraid that you will have to stop also," Hermes replied. Our father Zeus has summoned us to come to Mount Olympus as quickly as possible." At once, Artemis placed the arrow she had been holding into the quiver she wore over her shoulder. "I will leave right away," she said, but as Hermes flew off again, he saw her looking longingly, or with great desire or want, at the bushes where the deer had disappeared. A minute later, the messenger god hovered in midair, high above the sea that surrounded Greece, and which held hundreds of islands of all sizes. With eyes as sharp as one of Artemis's arrows, Hermes shot through the ocean waves. Weaving among a dozen dancing dolphins, he came to rest next to the massive or very large shoulders of his uncle, Poseidon, the god of the seas and of all that crosses the seas. Poseidon's long white beard moved like sea foam in the water as he turned and spoke. "Hermes, you are welcome here," he boomed out in a mighty voice. And Hermes remembered that Poseidon, brother of Zeus, could make the earth shake, for he was also the god of earthquakes. Pointing his great trident, a three-pointed pitchfork which he sometimes used to stir up the waves of the sea god said to Hermes, "Watch with me." So the two gods watched as the dolphins swam in smooth, wide figure eights, and massive whales rose up from the depths to sweep through the loops of the dolphin's design. When the show was over, 100 octopi jetted or moved quickly in front of the whales and dolphins, shooting black ink from their bellies as a sort of closing theater curtain to end the performance. Poseidon roared with laughter at this surprise ending. Then turning to Hermes, he said, "What brings you here, nephew?" Hermes replied, "Zeus asks you to come with all speed to Mount Olympus." "I shall go at once," he said. But before he set out to see his brother, Poseidon took the time to thank the dolphins, whales, and octopi for their performance. When he finished, Hermes was already gone. "It is wonderful how he does that," Poseidon thought. In the sky high above him, Hermes was already seeking out another of the gods. Suddenly, a lightning bolt split the air only 10 feet from the messenger god. This was followed by a deafening crash of thunder. Zeus was getting impatient. Hermes called upward, "I'm moving as quickly as I can, my lord." The messenger of the gods hurried on his way.